Rebecca learned the price of silence the night her father asked her to marry a stranger. The wind pressed against the cabin walls as if it wanted inside, slipping through every crack it could find. The fire was low. The room smelled of damp wood and boiled roots. Rebecca stood near the table, her hands wrapped around a chipped cup she had not realized was empty. Her father sat on the narrow bed by the wall, shoulders bent, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the floor like it might open and offer him a way out. He did not look at her when he spoke. That hurt more than the words. "There's a man," he said. "He came to the trading post today. Asked about us." Rebecca felt the air tighten in her chest. Men did not ask about families like hers unless they wanted something taken or owed. Her brother and sister were asleep on the other side of the room, curled together beneath a thin quilt. Rebecca glanced at them, then back to her father. "What kind of man?" she asked. Her father swallowed. "A mountain man. Quiet. Rough clothes. Said his name was Caleb." Rebecca waited. She had learned patience early. Silence often carried more truth than speech. "He said he'd settle the debt," her father continued. "All of it. The land, the tools, the notes the creditors keep bringing." His voice cracked on the last word. "In return, he wants a wife." The cup slipped from Rebecca's hands and struck the table, rolling but not falling. She did not reach for it. Outside, a wagon creaked past the cabin, iron wheels grinding against frozen dirt. Life in Pine Ridge did not stop for private moments. "So you told him yes," she said quietly. Her father finally looked up. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from weeks without rest. "I told him I'd ask you." Rebecca felt anger rise, sharp and clean, not at her father, not even at the man she had never met. At the truth she had always known and hoped would never arrive, that everything she was had a price, and that price would be demanded eventually. "We don't sell daughters," she said, though her voice lacked force. Her father closed his eyes. "I know." The creditors had already taken the horse. Next would come the land. After that, the cabin. Pine Ridge had no mercy for families that could not keep up. Illness was treated as weakness, poverty as failure. Rebecca turned toward the small window. Frost traced the edges of the glass like delicate white scars. She had dreamed once of leaving this place on her own terms, of teaching school, of choosing a life instead of being handed one. Those dreams felt far away now, like something that belonged to another girl. "Did he seem cruel?" she asked. "No," her father said. "That's what troubles me. He spoke plain, didn't rush, didn't bargain." Rebecca exhaled slowly. Men who rushed were easy to see. It was the calm ones who were dangerous. Later that afternoon, she saw him. Caleb stood near the trading post, his back to the wall, as if he preferred it there. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched by early gray. His coat was worn but clean. His hands rested loosely at his sides, steady, unmarked by nervousness or need. When his eyes met hers, he nodded once. No smile, no claim. "I won't force you," he said when she approached. His voice was low, even. "If you say no, I'll leave." Rebecca studied him. There was no hunger in his gaze, no urgency. That unsettled her more than any pressure could have. "Why us?" she asked. "Because you're honest," he said. "And because I need a wife who can endure a hard place." A hard place. He said it as if it were weather, not a life. They spoke little after that. He did not promise comfort. He did not offer affection, only stability, shelter, time. That night, Rebecca lay awake listening to her father cough in the dark. Each breath sounded like a question with no answer. She imagined Pine Ridge without them, imagined her siblings hungry, imagined herself saying no and living with the echo of it. At dawn, she stood at the door as the sky lightened to pale gray. "I'll do it," she said. Her father wept then, quietly, ashamed. Rebecca did not cry. She felt something settle instead, heavy but solid. A choice made with open eyes was still a choice. When Caleb arrived with the papers, she signed her name carefully, her hand steady. He watched without comment. As they stepped outside, Rebecca looked once more at the cabin, at the narrow path leading away from everything she had known. She did not know what waited beyond the mountains. She only knew she was walking toward it by her own will. And that, she told herself, would have to be enough. The wedding took place before the sun reached the tops of the pines, with no guests and no music. By the time Pine Ridge began to stir, Rebecca was already on the trail, seated beside a man who was now her husband, heading away from everything familiar. The wagon moved slowly at first, wheels cutting shallow lines into the dirt road before it narrowed into a mountain path. Rebecca kept her hands folded in her lap, feeling the rhythm of motion travel through the wooden seat and into her bones. She did not look back. She had decided that once was enough. Caleb drove without hurry. He spoke only when necessary, guiding the mule with light pressure on the reins. His calm felt practiced, not forced. It made Rebecca aware of how loud her own thoughts were. The mountains rose steadily around them, dark slopes layered with trees. The air grew thinner, colder. By midday, Pine Ridge felt like something imagined rather than left behind. They stopped near a stream to rest. Caleb built a small fire and set water to warm. He offered her bread and dried meat, then turned away, giving her space without being asked. Rebecca watched him from the corner of her eye. Everything he did was efficient, deliberate. Nothing wasted, nothing careless. "You've traveled this road often," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Alone?" "Mostly." That was all he offered. Rebecca chewed slowly, weighing her next words. She had expected awkwardness, perhaps tension. Instead, there was this quiet distance that felt intentional, like a door kept closed not out of fear, but choice. They traveled for days. Forest gave way to steep passes where the path narrowed and dropped away on one side. At night, they camped beneath open sky or beneath the shelter of trees. Caleb always took the watch. Rebecca never asked why. Each mile deepened her uncertainty. His supplies were better than she had expected. The mule was strong and well cared for. He knew the land too well for someone who passed through it only to trade. More than once, she caught herself wondering what kind of man chose such a life, when he clearly did not need to scrape by. On the fourth night, rain trapped them beneath a rocky overhang. The sound of it filled the air, steady and loud. Rebecca sat wrapped in her coat, staring out at the dark. "Why didn't you tell my father everything?" she asked without looking at him. Caleb did not answer right away. The fire crackled between them. "Because he didn't ask," he said finally. Rebecca turned toward him, and I didn't know what to ask. He met her gaze then, his expression unreadable. "You still don't." The truth of that settled heavily. She realized how little she truly knew about the man beside her. She was his wife in name, yet a stranger in every other way. "You said you needed someone who could endure a hard place," she said. "Where is it?" Caleb looked past her, toward the darkness beyond the rain. "High country, far from towns." "Why there?" "It's quiet." Rebecca considered that answer. Quiet could mean safety. It could also mean isolation. The road climbed higher. Snow appeared along the shaded edges of the trail, even though the season had not yet turned. Rebecca's hands grew stiff with cold. Caleb noticed and handed her thicker gloves without comment. She began to see patterns in him. He never lied outright, but he chose his words carefully. He never promised more than he was willing to give, and he never explained himself unless pressed. One evening, as the sky burned red behind the peaks, Rebecca finally asked the question she had been carrying since Pine Ridge. "Do you regret it?" she said. "This marriage?" Caleb studied the horizon before answering. "No." She waited for more, but none came. "And you?" he asked. Rebecca felt the weight of honesty settle in her chest. I don't know yet. He nodded, as if that was the most reasonable answer she could have given. By the time the trail narrowed into a passage barely wide enough for the wagon, Rebecca understood one thing clearly. Whatever waited at the end of this road was not simple. Caleb was not poor in the way she had believed, and he was not open in the way she had hoped. As the mountains closed around them, Rebecca felt a strange pull between fear and resolve. She had not been brought here by force. She had chosen this path. And now, with each step deeper into the unknown, she wondered what truth he was carrying, and whether it would change everything she thought she was becoming. They reached the valley at dusk, when the light was thin and pale, and the mountains stood like a wall around them. Rebecca had expected another stretch of forest, perhaps a rough cabin hidden among the trees. Instead, the trail opened suddenly, and the land dropped away into a wide, protected basin. The lodge stood at its center. It was not grand in the way city houses were grand, but it was solid and deliberate, built of stone and timber, with wide windows that caught the fading light. Smoke rose from a chimney. Fences traced the edges of cleared land. Barns and smaller buildings stood back from the main house, orderly and well-kept. Rebecca felt the wagon slow beneath her. "This is yours?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Yes," Caleb said. The word landed between them, heavy and final. He brought the wagon to a stop before the front steps. Before Rebecca could gather herself, the door opened. A man stepped out, followed by a woman carrying a ledger. They greeted Caleb by name, not as a traveler, but as an owner returning home. Their respect was immediate and unforced. Rebecca stayed seated, her hands clenched in her lap. The pieces she had been holding apart finally fell together. The supplies, the mule, the calm. None of it had belonged to a poor mountain man scraping by. Inside, the lodge was warm and bright. Polished floors, clean walls, a long table set with care. Everything spoke of planning and permanence. Rebecca felt out of place in her worn coat and simple dress, as though she had stepped into someone else's life without permission. Caleb dismissed the staff quietly, then turned to her. "I owe you the truth," he said. "All of it." He explained without drama, the land, the business interests tied to it, the family name he no longer used outside the valley. He spoke of distance from cities by choice, of trust earned slowly, of reasons for secrecy that did not excuse it. "I didn't tell you before," he said, "because I needed to know you would choose me without it." Rebecca listened, her chest tight. Memories surfaced without warning. Her father at the table, head bowed. The creditor's boots on the cabin floor. Her own name written on a marriage paper like a transaction. "So this was a test," she said. "No," Caleb replied. "It was protection, for both of us." That answer cut deeper than anger. She turned away, walking toward the window. Outside, the valley lay quiet, untouched, beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. "You let me believe I was being taken from one hardship into another," she said. "You let me think this was the best I could hope for." Caleb did not defend himself. "I gave you the truth when we arrived. I'll give you another thing now." He reached into his coat and placed a folded paper on the table. "Your name isn't bound here," he said. "If you want to leave, I'll see that your family's debts stay settled. You can go back or go anywhere else. No one will stop you." Rebecca stared at the paper. Freedom offered cleanly, without condition. The room felt suddenly smaller. She thought of Pine Ridge, of how little choice had truly existed there. She thought of the road into the mountains, of nights spent listening to the wind, of a man who had never once raised his voice or claimed her as something owned. "You knew this would come," she said softly, "that I'd stand here and have to decide again." "Yes," Caleb said, "and this time, it has to be yours alone." Rebecca closed her eyes. For a moment she was back in the cabin, frost on the window, a cup rolling across the table. She felt again the weight of duty, the pull of sacrifice. But something was different now. She was not choosing between herself and her family. She was choosing what kind of life she would accept. She opened her eyes and pushed the paper back toward him. "I'll stay," she said, "but not as someone kept in the dark." Caleb met her gaze. "Then nothing stays hidden." That night, as she lay in a room larger than any she had known, Rebecca did not feel rescued. She felt challenged. The valley was not an ending. It was a beginning shaped by truth, risk, and her own voice. And for the first time since leaving Pine Ridge, she wondered not what this marriage would demand of her, but what it might allow her to become. Rebecca learned quickly that silence could be used as a weapon just as easily as words. The first visitors arrived within a week of her settling into the lodge. They came well-dressed, their coats clean, their voices smooth. They spoke to Caleb as if Rebecca were not in the room, and when they did address her, it was with smiles that never reached their eyes. They praised the valley, the land, the careful distance Caleb kept from cities. Then they asked questions that were not really questions at all. "How are you finding life so far?" one woman asked, her tone pleasant. "It must be quite an adjustment," Rebecca answered calmly. "It is." Another visitor, a man with silver at his temples, nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Not everyone adapts well to responsibility," he said lightly, "especially when it arrives so suddenly." Rebecca understood then. This was not about concern. It was assessment. Caleb remained composed, but she noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand rested flat on the table as if grounding himself. He did not interrupt. He was letting them speak. As the days passed, the visits increased. Conversations moved from polite remarks to careful suggestions. Perhaps Rebecca would be happier living elsewhere. Perhaps it would be easier for everyone if she did not involve herself in estate matters. Perhaps the marriage, while understandable, had been rushed. One afternoon, a woman named Catherine arrived without notice. She carried herself with confidence born of long practice. Her clothes were elegant but restrained. Her gaze was direct. "I am Caleb's aunt," she said, extending her hand to Rebecca. "I had hoped to meet you sooner." They sat together in a smaller room away from the others. Catherine spoke kindly, but her words were sharp with purpose. "You must understand," she said, "that this family carries obligations, investors, agreements, a reputation built over years. Sudden changes cause concern." Rebecca folded her hands. "Marriage is not sudden." Catherine smiled. "Not to those who choose it freely." The implication hung between them. "You come from a difficult background," Catherine continued. "That is not your fault, but it does place you at a disadvantage here. People will question your judgment, your influence." Rebecca met her gaze. "They already are." "Yes," Catherine said, "and I'm trying to help you avoid unnecessary strain. For Caleb's sake." "For his sake," Rebecca repeated. Catherine leaned forward. "If you care for him, you will consider stepping back. Let him manage affairs without complication." Rebecca felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "And what place would that leave me?" "A comfortable one," Catherine replied smoothly. "Just not a visible one." That evening, Rebecca confronted Caleb. "They want me to disappear." Caleb did not deny it. "They fear what they cannot control." "And you?" she asked. "Do you fear it too?" He looked at her then, truly looked. "No." The pressure did not ease. Letters arrived from offices in Denver, notices requesting meetings, reviews of contracts that had never before been questioned. Each carried the same quiet message. Rebecca was a problem. Finally, Catherine returned with an offer framed as a courtesy. "There will be a reception in Denver," she said. "Investors, officials, respected families, an opportunity to reassure everyone." "And if I attend?" Rebecca asked. Catherine smiled. "Then questions may be answered. If you do not, conclusions will be drawn." It was a challenge disguised as an invitation. That night, Rebecca stood on the balcony overlooking the valley. The lights below glowed warm and steady. She thought of Pine Ridge, of how little space she had been allowed there. She had not come this far to be reduced again. "I'll go," she said. Caleb turned toward her. "They will try to corner you." "I know. They will measure every word." "I know." "Rebecca," he said quietly, "you don't owe them anything." She looked at him, her expression firm. "I owe myself the truth of who I am in that room." The journey to Denver began the next morning. As the mountains fell away behind them, Rebecca felt the familiar tension of entering a world that believed it could decide her worth. But this time, she was not arriving unaware. She was arriving prepared. The ballroom in Denver was brighter than anything Rebecca had known, filled with light that reflected off polished floors and tall mirrors. Music played softly, measured and formal, while conversations moved in careful circles. She felt every eye pause when she entered beside Caleb. Not because she was loud or improper, but because she did not belong in the way they expected. She stood straight anyway. Men in tailored coats and women wrapped in silk studied her with polite interest. Some smiled. Others did not bother to hide their doubt. Rebecca recognized the look. It was the same one she had seen in Pine Ridge, only dressed in finer clothes. Aunt Catherine greeted them near the center of the room. "You came," she said, as if it were still uncertain. "I said I would," Rebecca replied. The reception unfolded like a slow test. Questions came wrapped in courtesy. Where had she learned her manners? How much did she understand of business? Did she plan to remain in the mountains, or would she prefer a quieter life elsewhere? Rebecca answered each one plainly. She did not exaggerate her knowledge, but she did not shrink from it either. She spoke of keeping accounts in Pine Ridge when her father was ill, of negotiating prices at the trading post, of managing scarcity without complaint. Some listeners lost interest. Others leaned closer. At one point, a man with a judge's bearing addressed her directly. "You must understand," he said, "that large operations require experience, tradition." Rebecca nodded. "I agree. They also require judgment and responsibility." The man raised an eyebrow. "And you believe you bring that?" She did not hesitate. "I believe I have practiced it my whole life." A murmur moved through the room. Later, when the governor himself joined their circle, Catherine made her move. "There have been concerns," Catherine said smoothly, "about the influence this marriage may have on ongoing agreements." The room quieted. Rebecca felt the familiar pressure rise, the urge to step back, to let others speak for her. Instead, she stepped forward. "Then let us be clear," she said. "My marriage does not weaken this enterprise. It strengthens it." Catherine's smile tightened. "On what basis?" "On accountability," Rebecca replied. "On transparency. On the understanding that land and people are not separate." She turned to the gathered investors. "You worry I lack refinement. Perhaps I do. But I know what it costs to fail those who depend on you. I know what happens when decisions are made without regard for consequence." The judge studied her carefully. "And what do you seek from this?" Rebecca took a breath. "Not permission, recognition." Caleb spoke then, his voice calm but firm. "My wife speaks with my authority." The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. Documents were brought forward, agreements reviewed, questions answered fully, without deflection. By the end of the evening, the tone had shifted. Doubt gave way to consideration, consideration to respect. When the reception ended, several investors approached Rebecca directly. Not to test her, but to consult her. Outside, the city lights stretched into the distance. Rebecca stood beside Caleb on the hotel steps, the cool night air steadying her. "You didn't just endure them," he said. "You changed the room." She looked at him. "You trusted me to." On the journey back, The mountains rose to meet them once more. But this time, Rebecca did not feel small against them. At the lodge, life resumed with new balance. Rebecca joined discussions openly. Her perspective was sought, not tolerated. Decisions were made together, argued through, shared. One evening, as they watched the valley settle into quiet, Rebecca realized something had shifted within her. She had not been proven worthy by the room in Denver. She had simply refused to be diminished by it. Caleb reached for her hand. "This place will change," he said. "Because of you." Rebecca looked out at the land she now helped shape. "Because of us." The valley remained still, holding their words. And somewhere beyond the mountains, others would hear of the woman who walked into a room that judged her and left it changed. That was a story worth carrying forward.